GM, it's Tuesday. We had the y00ts mint yesterday. They've done about 200,000 Solana in sales so far in secondary market. We'll be talking about the y00ts, what we can expect later in this week, and everything else going on the ETH side. Welcome. So today we're going to talk about y00ts. They've been basically the last few weeks. That's what everyone's been hyped about. And they finally launched yesterday after a couple delays, and there's fun on Twitter. People were kind of not so excited about it, and most of the loudest people were those that didn't get on the list. So that was part of it. But we have brought one Cam Saletti, who actually was on the y00t list. So he has a y00t, and then Tyler D, who doesn't have a y00t. So we have a little of both sides there. And then we'll be talking about that. But we're going to start off today with a little of what's been going on the ETH side and then sort of comp that to y00ts. So Tyler, we have the Project Reggie page up here on luckytrader.com. And what are you noticing here? Because there's a couple things that pop up to me. First thing is nothing has over 2,500 ETH on this list over the past week, which I don't know. I don't remember us seeing any recent history, at least, with less than 3,000 at the top of the board. So what are you seeing on this list so far?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, the first thing that jumps out to me is just the lack of volume. And whenever ENS is at the top of the board, that means it's a rough week for everything else. The way these market cycles seem to have been kind of running in this recent bear market is PFPs will catch some interest. When that interest tails off and they're just chopping or declining, the money starts rotating to ENS. It was a terrible weekend for PFPs and really almost every NFT product. Volume was the lowest it's been all year, Saturday and Sunday. Yep. But ENS had a good weekend, and then y00ts, of course, caught fire in the last 24 hours. We'll talk about that later on. But yeah, it's tumbleweed out there for ETH NFTs right now.
Yeah, and so Cam, I know that you have been in the ENS streets a little bit as well. And what are you seeing, like, from your point of view? Are these like all sorts of ENS? Are these just certain ones that are popping recently? What have you been seeing over there from the ENS domains?
It's been a lot of the numbers, and I know when this run first happened, we had a Twitter Spaces about it. That kind of seemed to be everyone in here's consensus takeaway, is that the numbers and like big like saying like Amazon and stuff like that, we're gonna be the cream that rose to the top, and that seems to be playing out. I like the numbers, not even just from a like, oh, it can match my profile picture standpoint, but just it's simple, and like I don't like there's a lot of people use ETH, so having something like sub 1,000, like when you think of it that way, like you might not value it, but I mean that's pretty rare asset to have a sub 1,000 number when millions of people use this blockchain.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen over the past 24 hours, there are 4 sales over 30 ETH. And I mean, that's pretty significant. We're not seeing 30 ETH sales on many non-Yuga assets recently. There was a Digi sale at, I think, 49 ETH yesterday. There's been a Moonbird sale recently at 40 ETH. But I mean, to see 4 sales from, if you want to call it the same collection, in this 10K club, or that's the 1K club. They're calling it 999.
Yeah,
that's what they call it. Yeah. So to see like 4 sales of over 30 ETH in the same collection is, I mean, pretty rare these days. Like even when the Digis were running up there, like they had 50 and 16 ETH floor, but it wasn't like they were getting tons of high-end sales. Like they had a few in the 50s. But yeah, I think that's pretty significant. So what do you think, Tyler? Is this something we're going to continue to see long-term? It seems like people are pretty bullish on these low numbers long-term.
Yeah, I think this is here to stay. This isn't just a fad cycle. The floor prices may go up and down just like everything does. But it seems like these are going to be a trend of up only, at least here for the foreseeable future. One thing that jumps out, like these aren't even good numbers. These numbers that sold in the 30s. I mean, these are
Yeah.
floor 3 digits: 103, 117, 724. I think one thing that has
724 flipped for 4 ETH. Also, it sold twice in there.
an amazing 4 ETH flip there in the last day. But I think something that helps maybe kind of start the run this weekend is Vitalik has been spending a lot of time talking about ENS, more specifically kind of proposing options for how are we going to handle these domains on a 50-year, 100-year time period. And his concern is essentially squatters or speculators are buying up all of the best assets, and they're just going to hold them, and the people who actually want to use them won't have the ability to do so. He's talking about a Harburger tax. I don't know if we need to really get into all that, but he clearly spending a lot of time thinking about that, and I think that alone has driven a lot of people to take ENS very seriously.
Yeah, and obviously with the merge coming up here in the next couple weeks, I mean, should be next week. So that I think is part of it as well. Like people talking about legacy, and I think people are trying to secure certain assets while it's still in this proof of work, even though it might switch over. I think this historical significance thing is getting to a lot of people. So I think people are trying to like secure certain bags in this next week or so. And obviously ENS domains is one that we've sort of always talked about as being somewhat of a hedge against NFTs because it's more of a bet on Ethereum itself. And it seems like based on the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio that we've seen over the past couple weeks, it does seem like people are getting pretty bullish on ETH versus Bitcoin. So I think that's one thing that's also been part of this. We saw a little dump off earlier today. Regular stock market was kind of dumping, and that led back to the currencies. But we did see a big jump in ETH yesterday, and Bitcoin didn't really go with it. So do you think that this is just the merge is coming, people are bullish on Ethereum, or are people really sort of getting off of this orange coin?
I think it could be both. Certainly the merge trade, the generic merge trade is long ETH and short Bitcoin, also short alts for the most part, as I understand it. So I could absolutely see the focus is on the ETH trade. We're seeing that it's been outperforming basically every day for the past few months. The ratio is near all-time highs. It's down to 12-1 Bitcoin to ETH right now. There's a lot of chatter sentiment that that's going to get to 10-1 ahead of the merge. The merge is almost here. It's next week. We don't know exactly when it's going to be, but it's kind of hard to believe that it's this massive event that we've been hearing and talking about for so long is now actually on the horizon. It was interesting to hear your take on people getting into historical NFTs ahead of the merge. I've been more in the camp that most people are just going to stay away from NFTs entirely until post-merge, and that's kind of my concern for the volume we're going to see for the next 10 days or so. Yeah. But to your point, maybe there's going to be some specific sets that benefit here.
Yeah, I thought of that with like the Chromie Squiggles, how they had been trading recently as well. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think in the back of some people's heads, they're thinking this is the last time they can have that take in a way. But yeah, I think in general, and we might talk about this more on Monday of next week, but I think in general, people are going to want to sort of avoid NFTs, at least on the Ethereum blockchain over the next week or so. You kind of don't want to, the day of the merge, I'd say I probably don't want to really be doing much on Ethereum. Like you probably can, but there's going to be, it probably won't be down for very long or anything like that. It should be pretty seamless, but you never know what could go wrong, or like there's going to be tons of links that pop up that day that you're going to be unsure about. So I mean, this could sort of transition into our next point, but I've sort of been thinking along the lines of people are going to be generally off of Ethereum that day. Are people going to want to get into, because they're going to be bored that day, into things like Solana, NFTs, trading on different blockchains, whether it's DeFi even. Doge Chain has been one that we've talked about a little bit here that had a couple little pumps last week as well. Like, do you think people are going to use these other chains in that day or two around the merge?
You know what blockchain doesn't have a merge event coming up? It's Solana. And that seems to be where most of the trading is going to move to here. Originally, I was kind of in the camp that the ETH native traders aren't going to want to essentially sell their ETH for Sol ahead of this merge event.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The price action has been so bearish. Like we've been expecting this big run up ahead of the merge. Kaleo's calling for 28K Bitcoin, 2,800 ETH. That seems like pie in the sky at this point, 10 days out. And if ETH continues to chop, I think people will be more likely to, go ahead and move over. And we've got a rising legend in Frank DeGod. If he's able to capture market attention here, we might see the first waves of movement from ETH over to Solana in quite some time.
Yeah, let's talk a little about it, because obviously this was a big question going into the weekend where, okay, well, we were supposed to mint on Friday, then they pushed it to Sunday. Oh, it's a holiday weekend. Is that going to be good? Then on Sunday, they said they had some bugs they had to fix, and you heard a lot more FUD going around. And then yesterday, you didn't hear anything at the time that it was expected to start minting. And then they came out and they said, okay, we're letting you know it's an hour before mint. They gave I don't know if you want to call it an excuse, but they gave an interesting little tweet about, like, they were at their headquarters and it was like overheating and their AC unit wasn't working. And it was like, okay, well, you've had how long to prepare for this? But yeah, there's been some FUD. Some of it was warranted, obviously, but as I had commented on one of the tweets that, like, most big hype drops don't go smoothly. Like, it's just, it is how it is. It's like part of the nature of it. It's so much hype. Like, everyone's expecting Solana to break. I think generally speaking, it was pretty smooth. Like, the website itself didn't work all that great. Like, you were getting errors, but at the same time, I think that kept it from overloading in a weird way. But then they gave an hour window freeze before anyone could sell on the secondary marketplace. Looking back, they probably needed to give 2 hours because not everyone got them within that first hour. I didn't get one in the first hour. I think it was like 15 minutes after the trading already started that I ended up getting one. But yeah, I think generally speaking, like, the process wasn't all that terrible. Like, I got the item I was going for. It was late at night is when it ended up happening. But I mean, we look at this volume and it kind of speaks for itself that I haven't seen the floor dip below. I think it was 113 was the lowest sale I saw. And it got up to about 169 or so at its highest. So it's been kind of trading in this 125 to 145 range for the most part. And obviously it's about 200,000 Solana volume, which I think when we did the math earlier, that's about 3,800 or so ETH. Yeah, so almost 4,000 ETH traded in the first day, and they still have 7 hours left in that first 24 hours. So the way I was wording it was, it reminds me of the first day of Moonbirds at like a 15% of the scale in number wise, but the speed in which the transactions were happening right away was fast because Solana is a fast blockchain. And I'm so bullish now on Magic Eden's platform. Like, why can't OpenSea just be like this? They have a research page. They have a live trading page. You can look at listings as they're flowing in, do quick buy. You don't have to click 6 times waiting for OpenSea's API to work. You can look at different statistics here. Like I was on here and I was just so excited about using Magic Eden instead of having to use OpenSea for this. But Cam, what was your take on it? Because I know it took you a little longer than me to actually physically get the mint. Were you concerned in any way on the minting process?
I think it was pretty obvious that it was not going to go well. We didn't know what was going to make it not go well, but we knew it wasn't just going to be this seamless thing. One thing I noticed is like when you kept getting the failed and you would have like the box pop up, like the phantom pop up, like when it wasn't going to work, it would say null. But then when it would try, it would give you like a transaction ID. I'm sorry, I'm not blockchain literate like that. So if I butchered that, I'm sorry. But I think people were competing to click it faster than other people. So like when I had like F6, 5, 2, whatever, I think everyone else at that same time had that same pop up. And like we were all trying to like beat each other to being the one to mash it first to get it to go through. So I think like we're only like one or getting minute at a time. I think that's what's going on. Cause I mean, that would make sense too. Cause we still have what, 3,500 left or so.
And over time, it became, if you want to call it, like became easier to mint. So I do think it was some sort of front loading. People are saying on Twitter that it was the website's API, not Solana itself. And then I think it's probably pretty clear that that was the case. And I don't know, like the problem is whenever there's all these hyped events, like you said, like I expect them not to be able to handle this type of demand. I mean, if you're assuming all 15,000 people went to click on the button at the same time, that's why I think the Moonbirds one was kind of, I don't know, the Moonbirds one was like way smoother than any of these other ones. People don't remember or like immediately forget. Like a week from now, people won't remember any of that with the minting stuff. Think about the other deed. The other deed was one of the worst minting experiences I've had, and people don't care. Like it was Yuga. Like I was sitting there for over an hour. I was doing it on my phone and just continually getting fails. And it's like, do you want to spend 2 ETH on gas on this? And I was like, well, it's just gonna fail again. And like whenever you have a hype mint, there's going to be so much demand that things are going to break. So what was your thoughts on this, Tyler? Because I think you had said that you might have been asleep for the actual mint part of it, but from your point of view, like, did you think that the delays? I think that was the last delay that people were going to like accept. But what was your sort of thoughts on this minting process?
Tyler, before you get into that, I just want to say when Lever Lou was trying to mint other deeds, he was at a Sublime concert, and I think that's hilarious because that was not the vibe at all. Trying to mint the other deeds, him sitting there watching Sublime front row, trying to mint that land.
I just gave up.
Yeah. In my old age, I was in bed. I missed this mint entirely.
But
I
was late. That was another part that I didn't love about it.
Right. But I think it speaks to his user base and collectors. And we can touch on this in a bit. As I understand it, there was a Spaces that went live at like 2 a.m. last night. It had 2,000 people on it. So right there, that gives you some insight into the age, the user base of the folks who are getting behind Frank and this project. There was a lot of fun. Anytime there is a majorly hyped mint, there's always going to be the big accounts who want to flood it. And then if you give any reason to do so, right, they're gonna jump onto that. And I think you're right. Ultimately, do any of us care about delays a week past a mint? Like the Moonbirds mint was easy. Including people who are buying right now, as we're seeing these live.
This is
sold on the screen.
Isn't Magic Eden just so excited? It's like tells you when they list, when they delist. It's kind of fun.
It is exciting, but it's par for the course. I mean, Artifacts and Clone X is one of the biggest blue chips in the ETH NFT space. They had a terribly botched mint. for the
Every
Clone X
time they do a
Files.
mint, I feel like it gets delayed too.
And insider trading as well.
Well,
Throw that one in there.
that's a whole nother discussion. Yeah.
And so that hasn't impacted it. You got another DG nailed it, and that was the worst mint. It burned hundreds of millions of dollars. Everyone's still
Yeah.
lined up, and now no one. Well, people still will FUD for that. Like no one really cares.
Right. They're thinking of it off of this new like 1.82 ETH price.
I care just for what
Yeah.
it's worth. Like I care that mint was terrible. All that money was burned. I'll care about that until I
Hurt the
don't care about
space a
NFTs
lot.
anymore. Yeah, like that
Yeah.
sucked. That really sucked that happened.
But ultimately,
Yeah.
this time change is probably good. So like this weekend was terrible for NFT volume. Granted, this mint was always going to attract the liquidity, but it came in at the tail end versus the
Yeah.
start, and people were back by Monday
Yeah.
night, right? And now it's kind of a clear week. There's really not that much going on in the ETH NFT space. We'll touch on that later in the show. It's smooth sailing. So I think it worked out okay from a timing perspective. And of course, it was 24 hours, right? So you didn't have to stay up till 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. to
Yeah.
mint. You could have minted this morning. Right now, there's still, 4K, about 3,800 left to be minted. It'll be curious to start watching that tracker. But what I want to hear from your guys' perspective is what was it like in the hours post mint if you guys were awake and kind of watching this and watching the volatility in the price? What were the vibes on Twitter, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it was kind of that waiting game for them to make an announcement. And that that's something we could talk about too if we want, for like things to happen over the weekend. But this whole Doodles not tweeting became like a big fight on Twitter on Saturday. I think that was Saturday, right? Or Sunday. And we talked about this last week where we thought Sunday was a bad decision for them timing wise. I think Monday, like you nailed it, like is a way better decision because now people wake up, they still could mint today. If they were gone yesterday or came back late and just wanted to go to bed. It seemed like people on Twitter there were two sides of it. You had people like Franklin is bored, who's just flaunting that he sold it for 127, where he missed out on 25 ETH here already, and he was talking about how, and I thought his reasoning was fine. Like I was okay with the reasoning. People are arguing the fact that like why does he even get a spot? But we could argue that I think it's all a marketing thing, and like look how much hype and demand was around it because they had names like Franklin who retweets that he's on the list. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, so he sold this for about 80, 90 ETH profit. And I
Sold,
think,
sir. You got to work it. Sold.
oh yeah, sorry, 80 sold.
You're right.
Because I had it in my head because he put in there that he's going to use this to buy another ape or something. So I was thinking 80 ETH. But yeah, his reasoning was basically, I don't do much on Sol. I don't know much going on over there. So I sold it because I don't know how to read it. He knows how to read BAYC sentiment. He knows how to trade that. So he's going to move the funds over to do that. So like I think that's fine. Do you want someone like that in the community of it? Probably not. Like you want the people in the y00ts community that are going to hold it. There's less than, I don't think I've even seen over 400 that have been listed at one given time. So like you want people that want to hold the item anyway. So it's fine to me when there's these undercutters in the first couple of days. I've been sort of trading off of that idea. I think when this wait list comes out, I'll also be looking to trade off of that, just because that's where these sharp movements really come from. But yeah, Cam, what did you notice? Because Cam was the one telling me that, hey, they're going to be doing a spaces in an hour. Like you might not want to go to sleep before that. Like you don't know what's going to happen on the spaces. So talk to us a little about the space that they had from the y00ts after, because there was also FUD that popped up out of that. But talk to us a little about what you heard in that space.
Solana is a frat party, to put it that way. Like it is just like a bunch of like dudes, girls. Like I would say on the younger end, I would say the average Solana user is probably younger than the average ETH user, and I think that's kind of what makes their community so strong, is because they have, like degenerates like me who, don't have like, a lovely wife and kids like Tyler does, or, more responsibilities like Lou. So they just have these loud, boisterous people like all the time, and they're just that it really, like, I hate the word community, but like they really feel like they're together there. And I think that's what the powerful part about this is, and why I like it so much, because I really think people are buying in to the idea, and Frank himself. And in terms of like the spaces, like their whole deal is basically they're really good at like attention meta, and like they understand that that's how this space works, and that's how things run. And like I'm not going to pretend to know what they have in plan, but I think betting that they're not aware that, like, hey, like we should probably do some stuff to get more attention right now while everything's hot, there's zero chance that's lost on them. Like they know what they're doing, like from like the psychology aspect of like marketing this project.
Yeah, I think
So
that's one thing, and I've been tracking it a little more recently than before, but I somewhat followed DeGods at 100 Soul. That was back before it when it started moving, like the first time ahead of Dead Gods, because I traded Dust back then going into that. They had like their halvening and stuff like that. So like I've been somewhat following them for a while, but it was more of the I just went and mostly did stuff on ETH instead of Solana. But yeah, a lot more recently, like it's clear to me that Frank understands people in the space. It's not like a Web 2 person hopping in and like not to make this sound negative towards Kevin Rose, but that was the first one that popped up in my head, was like Kevin Rose is coming from running Web 2 companies. Frank probably hasn't really run a company before, but he like sort of grew up in Web 3 as far as this project and him. So he's like watching what people like about different projects going on in the space. I think if you listened to the podcast he did with Kevin Rose, he talked a little about how he's basically taking stuff that he's seeing works with other brands, other projects, and then using that to help his own project. And I think that's where this whole like application came from, this idea. And he wants to create a community of the people who are the way that they worded it was like, we want to create a community of people who are moving this space forward, but basically curating the best group of people for a project that you possibly could. So that was the idea of getting these influencers in the original list, was he wanted people like Franklin in there. If they're going to sell it, he's fine with that. Like, you go sell it. Maybe we don't want you in our community. And it's just the way he talks is very relatable. Like, it feels like I believe what he's saying when he's talking, but he's not like just trying to sell it. So there were a couple of people that hopped on the space that were like, "Yeah, I sold right away. Like, I papered that. Like, that
He
was the
said he
first things they
floored
said."
it. He said he floored it. First words
He's
out of
like,
his
"I
mouth was
floored it first."
hilarious.
He's like, "But honestly, like, I feel like I shouldn't have. Like, the price has gone up since then." He's like, "I clearly people like what you're doing," and it was kind of interesting. And then there was one where a girl hopped on and basically said the same thing, and it just cut out. And Bender had a tweet that was like, "Oh, he's just like cutting people out now that say that they undercut." But I was like, that was like the third person that said that, so I don't know what happened with that one. But yeah,
Salt's gonna salt, man.
there was like 2,000 people in this space, which generally speaking, that has been an indicator of some of these. What was the first potatoes space?
Tails
Didn't
was
that
like
have at least?
6,000 at
Yeah,
first, but then
but not at
recently,
2 a.m.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
not
thought.
2 a.m.
Bad.
Recently, numbers are down. I mean, Future Proof, major YouTube
Yeah.
event last Wednesday, had less than 1,000.
Yeah.
So there is real interest in this, and I think there's a few areas we can branch off. Bender clearly has an agenda against
Oh,
this
yeah.
I'll
project at
call
this
it
point.
salty on stream right now. You're salty. I'll say it.
But
It's not like Ryder Rips level, but I mean, he is just trying to find things that are negative, and some of them are warranted, though. I mean, you can't argue that like delays are bad for a project. Like, generally speaking, if you keep delaying, that can't be a good thing.
It's like
But
yelling at a traffic light because it's taking too long to change.
not only that, it's like it's part of Frank's personality at this point, right? Is like he's going to delay his minute. He's not good at that. He's not good at the technical aspects of that. And he's been
and that's what he'll
upfront.
tell you too. He said
Like
they
this
call him Frank Delay. That's what he said on the pod with Kevin Rose, and that was before they delayed it. Like he even said, like it's probably going to delay. That's why I said most likely. So
That has
it's kind of funny.
2,600 views too, and you go look at like the other proof stuff. Like, not I'm not trying to come at Kevin
Yeah,
Rose,
yeah.
but a lot of it doesn't have that many views. But like Frank came on, and like that's one of their most viewed videos that they have that isn't a proof conference. It
It's
might
also
be the
that
most.
mega hype cycle
and,
as well.
yeah, he's not this product manager who's going to hit all the milestones on his little project plan, and that's totally fine because he's worried about other things. But I think coming back to the community, I think might be the most important question for all of this is this the D-Gods community that's so strong? Is it the y00ts community that's so strong? Are they different? Should we view these as one? And then, because that is going to impact how we trade these two projects in the future.
Lee, you want to give the logical take first before I go on a bender here?
I think that it's the way that I see it is they will always be under the D-Gods wing. But the thing is, there's a lot of new people that are in here. And since they somewhat curated the list, I think to an extent, it is somewhat going to be somewhat of a different community. Like if I don't, mutant apes kind of separated themselves, but they still look the same, right? Like to an extent, they're still an ape. I don't think it's going to be as tight as that, but I also think they will be limited upside wise against D-Gods personally.
All right. So I'm not going to go on some tangent about how I think they're like a lock to pass them, but I just think out of every like project that has its own genesis, I think this is the least linked to its genesis out of like any of them. Like if you like Cool Cats, Little Pudgies, Mutant Apes, and they just look so different. They're not the same thing at all. And like I care about, like, I'm not that far. Like, I get it. I agree with Lou. Like, that makes more sense that they can't pass the gods. So I'm going to care about, like, the gods floor, why I hold a y00ts, even if I don't hold that, because, like, there's probably going to be some, like, causation there. But I think if you went out and surveyed, like, all the people who got y00tlist and didn't get, like, don't have a D god, I think, like, the amount of people, like, that actually really don't care about D-Gods at all would surprise you compared to if you asked like a mutant ape holder or a Cool Pets holder. Like they would all care about their Genesis project. I don't think a lot of y00ts people are necessarily like are like living and dying like with like I think they're two completely separate things. It just so happened to spur from this one. But yeah, like if I was gonna bet on it, they probably won't pass them. But I think it's less than a 0% chance, which I think says a lot. Like it could be 0.01, but that's still more than zero.
Yeah, I think you made good points. I think what's ultimately going to drive it is how Frank handles it. And this is probably one of his biggest challenges.
Yeah,
going forward is how is he going to manage D-Gods and driving value to them versus y00ts. And now there's Dust Labs, which was just announced $7 million in funding to make Dust relevant. Dust the token. So it's a lot to manage. It's going to be interesting.
That's where
to see
I
how
don't
he
think
does
it can be separate.
Well, he said that in the space yesterday too. Like he kind of said he wanted to reward people like further down the pipeline, which would be like D-Gods. So like they're the first ones. Like they've been here. Like they're holding what
OGs.
started. Yeah, and he said as much on that space, like that he kind of plans like he wants them to get the most out of everything, like moving forward with what they're doing. But we'll see how it goes. Like I mean, he canceled a whole project, so like I'm excited, but like I really don't trust anything he says in a good way until it actually happens.
He opened it with this is a blank canvas. Like we're going to decide things along the way with the community in mind. So like I think they've already changed some things that originally was going to be one thing, and then community feedback said they didn't like that, so they're switching it to another thing. As Gravity is saying, originally this was the Duppies community, and he's saying, it sure isn't the Duppies community. So it is somewhat a new community in here versus DGods.
And I think what an interesting model is, and we haven't really seen this model play out yet, is it kind of raises the question, why does the Genesis set have to be prioritized? So all the DGods holders were given essentially the opportunity to mint. They were given the allow list for this y00ts drop, and they had the chance to accumulate dust, right, over the last days and months. So this was essentially a free mint for anyone who held the DGods for a while, right?
Oh, DGods holders are happy right now.
So is that enough even, to reward those holders and say, okay, now this is the next stage of the evolution? And what if y00ts becomes the primary focus? It's almost like if Yuga had said, here's BAYC, now we're going to put all of our eggs in the MAYC basket. Or a better one might be like Proof versus Moonbirds, right? So all the Proof holders got to mint 2 Moonbirds. If Kevin said, okay, we're going to focus a lot more heavily on Moonbirds project and building that out, would Proof holders be upset? It's a different question, but we haven't really seen that model. I would be interested to see a version of that and see how the market takes it. That's probably the only real scenario where y00ts could flip DGods.
I was telling Lou last night, which I don't know how much he agreed with me, but like, look at Frank, I love you. If you're watching this, it's not fun. You're my boy. I'm rooting for you. But like, look at these. Look what is on your screen right now. And then look at the y00ts previews. What do you think could be marketed better and like reach more people, like this, or like the cartoon like y00ts? Like that's why I like
I
you
kind of
so
disagree
much.
there, because you could say like the artwork is better, but at the same time, like what's the biggest running joke on the internet, Instagram and whatnot now is like, oh, a picture of a monkey, haha. I think DGods have a specific look that what it is from
That's
looking
fair.
at it.
It's a fair rebuttal.
And you know what it is, and the dead gods are very similarly looking. Here's a question for you, Tyler. Like, do you think, because I have my answer, but would you rather have 3 of the y00ts or 1 of the DGods? They're basically trading at that right now. So like I had been thinking, ideally I trade this up into a DGod.
So I'm 3 y00ts. I feel like the ROI potential is better there. It feels like it's got more energy and momentum.
Is that just because it hasn't revealed yet?
That's a part of it. And I think we should talk about pre-reveal trade here in a bit. But I don't know. I'm just more excited about y00ts. I feel part of my thesis right now, and it's evolving by the minute, is that I could see a new wave of Sol NFT holders and traders coming over because of y00ts. Yeah. And if that's the case, they might be more y00ts native, y00ts focused,
lower entry point,
and they may not care about DGods.
That was my whole point to Lou, kind of like I know what you mean, like they came from DGods, so I get it. Like technically DGods brought them over, but like people weren't coming over to buy these. They branched over to buy the y00ts, and I think that says a lot.
Yeah, but it also kind of off of our historical narrative, like DGods is the one that is moving the markets to Solana. Like you wouldn't be here if it weren't for DGods running from 100 to 600.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like I think that's part of it, that holders of DGods are going to value it. And when we talk about things like celebrities buying Bored Apes, it's because what is the one? This is Ethereum NFT. I want the best one. People look at Bored Ape and they look at the CryptoPunks potentially. So I think right now it's DGods. I think y00ts have a lot of space to run with it, depending on what they do and what they end up doing with that blank canvas. I think is going to be part of it. I think a lot of the community stuff they're trying or potentially trying could be good for it, especially with like the art side of things and the traits. So I could see it, but we haven't seen anything like that ever play out in that way. Like Moonbirds never caught Proof. Whenever Moonbirds started rising,
That's a
Proof
way
rose
bigger
with
supply
it.
difference, though, right? That's like huge, isn't it?
Yeah, but like when Moonbirds went to 40 ETH, Proof went to 140 ETH. Like Proof didn't sit at 60. You know, like it rose, they rose together. I guess that's sort of the point I'm going with is like if Utes get up to 300 soul, then DGODs are probably over 500 at that point. Like I don't know about the gap, like the flipping of Utes to DGODs. I don't know. That just seems like it'll be weird when it starts happening. People will just start buying up the DGODs, is my thought.
And the reality is, like, let's just look at the metrics right now. The DGODs ran up to 600 soul floor ahead of the mint. It's now down to 440, and the Utes are almost 150. So it's playing out like almost every companion drop that we've seen, where the market moves X amount, X is the companion, and then X gets subtracted from the floor. So it's hard to start going down this path of Utes is going to flip when so far what we've seen is this is playing out like every companion drop we've seen.
Yeah.
With the ratios being up for debate, and this is definitely one of the tighter ratios 3-1 that I can remember. I think beans at peak were like 5-1, 4 to 5-1. MUAC, right, has never really gotten much higher than 5-1.
That's the question I had for you guys. Out of stuff that's like, like a 2-1 in supply. So, like there's a 10K, a 20, and like the expansive 20K, or they're even like outside of stuff that isn't 0, because that ratio would be 1-1. Like this is probably going to be the best ratio out of like anything that has like the Genesis, and then, was that 1.5x the amount of supply with the expansion. I think this ratio is like, it's going to be tight and only get tighter. I don't really see like it going like DGODs like going like upwards and these ever moving downwards type of thing. Like I think they'll, like, I think these will stay within like what is it right now that we're over 4-1 right now, right? We're like what, like 3.5 to 1.
Like 3.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever breaks below 4, and which would be like one of the
Yeah.
strongest expansion collections, like because it used to be MAYC, and that's why that 5 it normally ranges from 5 to 6 to 1, right?
Well,
yeah, but that's also 2 times the supply.
So the Daigaku airdrop with the spirits in the past week has been trading anywhere from 2-1 to 3-1. So that's a tighter, and I guess that's the same collection size. So a little bit different. So the market cap ratios are going to be a little bit different, but we'll see. I'm curious for you guys' thoughts as mentors. How are you going to play this pre-reveal, post-reveal? I'm sure a lot of folks, this is a big ticket item now. It's already 5 or 6x in a terrible bear market. So is this a sell, hold, or double down?
Yeah, I just don't think this is going to be able to. The thing about it holding is people being on Solana, and like this is already pretty much the number 2 on Solana. Like this just immediately hops into number 2 on Solana. How are there going to be enough people interested? So that brings me to another point I wanted to ask you is, do you think this is going to somewhat pump into other Solana projects now that people, maybe they went and bought Dust with USD that they had or ETH that they had, but now it's over on the Solana blockchain. They sell this for 150 Solana. What are they doing with 150 Solana? Like, are they bridging it back, or are they looking at this leaderboard, this ABC that's number 3 right now? Has also done a lot of volume in the past day. It's risen from 20 to 30 soul since Utes dropped. So that one has been moving. OK Bears is one that we've seen a big run on there. I think OK Bears are, I would compare them to like Pudgy Penguins on how they rose. and people just sort of have them now. What's their floor is around 60. So like, do you think this is going to trickle into, oh, now we have the best collection that was on Solana, like what's the next best that could run? Or do you think people just bridge it back?
I think it will. I think we're already seeing that. If we just look at the volume stats here, Primates up 250%, Galactic Geckos up 250%. You know, four others, OK Bears, ABC, they're all up 30 to 40% volume wise. So the money's rotating. It's one of the number one rules of NFT ecosystems is people don't cash out. They typically rotate around. And if you think about this,
It's
especially this user base on Solana, if we think they skew younger, more risk taking, like what's the point of selling? I just hit a 5x. Why move that to USDC when I could do another 5x, right? So I want to find that next 5x. And I think there's going to be two schools of thought. And I am definitely not a Solana NFT expert by any means. I need to spend a lot more time. I think there's two ways to play it. You go to the higher floor, more established brands like OK Bears, or you go lower end, right? Something like Shrimps, Satori.
Sweep up the Shrimps.
D Farmer's been touting Shrimps pretty hard.
So I had this thought like a week and a half ago, and Shrimps was like the top. I just looked at volume, and Shrimps was like the top volume on the day, and they were going to be revealing the next day. So I said to Cam, I was like, maybe I should just sweep Shrimps. And look right there on the right, there's a sweep button. They make it very easy on Magic Eden to sweep. These things were like 2 Soul pre-reveal. And they look a lot like Subducks art.
They do.
And I thought there'd be people like interested in that. And people are, my thought process for that was, I also thought they would come out. I didn't love what they revealed into. I thought they looked better in the previews. But like that one with the red on his face, like what's going on with that one, you know? But my thought process was because I wanted to also sort of practice on how to use Magic Eden. It's been a while since I had used it for something that was potentially hyped and moving. So I did it as like practice because I took one that had high volume. And yeah, it's a decent amount of volume going up and down. And like, these aren't big flips. Like it was what, $60 to $130 or whatever was if you had it for over the past 2 weeks. But you know, only 5K supply. Most of these projects don't have massive supplies. But yeah, Shrimps was one that I actually got into trading a little bit because how much volume they have, total volume of 40,000 Solana, and this has been out for a few weeks. So like that puts some of this y00ts numbers into perspective.
78 ETH. I mean, that's not terrible.
Yeah, that I think that's been around for like 2 weeks though. I was gonna say, yeah.
You're pumping the bags on the stream. I see.
No, I don't have any Shrimps, but I did. So, I trade them pre-reveal.
I want to answer Tyler's question before we move on, like on what I want to do after mint. Like my logic is this: it could be very flawed. It might not work, and like I'm very well aware of that. But like this, just you don't get lightning in a bottle too often. It might explode, and the glass might break. I don't know. It could go, but this, I haven't felt like enjoyment. Which is also because, you know, I got the mint and get it way cheaper. Like, of course, that's going to, like, make me more bullish. But it's the first thing that I'm, like, I really have, like, faith in this. And I'm really excited to see where it goes. And, like, I don't know about you guys, but that's not really a feeling that has been very common the last 6 months. And, like, I don't really, like, want to get rid of that to go do stuff that has all bad vibes. Like, I want to be where the good vibes are. And, like, the vibes feel good here.
No, that's probably the foundational part of my thesis on why this could be a great play. And we were chatting with Lou a little bit about this. So if we look at the Solana numbers, their users, their daily active users in the last month, it's on a clear uptick here. It's at 34,000 users on Magic Eden. And that's up from earlier in August, 23,000, right? So clearly the mint is driving some users. Let's compare that to OpenSea on Ethereum. 400,000. So there's 10x more users on Ethereum right now. We are very realistic about this NFT bear market on Ethereum. There are not really any catalysts for new users to enter the space right now. And that's why we're chopping and seeing slow decline at the macro highest level. There is a catalyst for new users on Solana in that you just need some rotation of the 400,000 users who are ETH native over to this blockchain.
And was this the event?
Table pounding it. Yeah, it was. It is going to be if it's not already.
What if this is the catalyst to kick off a Solana NFT bull run like ETH saw last summer? It's possible. Of course, the macro backdrop is much, much worse. Yeah. But, if there was an event, maybe this y00ts meant could be that.
It's the perfect storm. Like we've talked about this timing thing, but I almost think it's better that you're doing this a week ahead of the merge. One thing that we opened the show about was people might not want to be trading NFTs at all over the next week. They might not want to touch coins at all. Some people are going to be selling off everything ahead of the merge because of uncertainty. And you could sell it and switch. Yeah, you could bridge over and start dabbling in Solana while there's some traffic over there. So that's the sort of bullish side to it. Not saying that that's necessarily what's going to happen or anything, but I've been in some chats that are bullish on Solana. I'm in other chats that instead of thinking about Ethereum over the next week, they're just thinking about week 1 NFL. So that's another thing on the timing that might be negative effect is on Sundays, people are going to want to be paying attention to NFL. And Saturday is college football, let's say. So
I thought you were going to bring up the salt weekends. And the other chats. That's what I thought you were about to say. There's salt over there.
It seems like there's less on my timeline now since it's come out, and I think somewhat quieting the haters where it is sitting at 150 SOL and there is all of this volume on it. I think that is quieting some of the haters. They'll be back to victory lap in a week when it goes from 150 down to 100 or whatever. I'm sure of it, but at the same time, like this has been pretty positive so far. So let's before we hop off, let's talk about this Art Blocks one on Ethereum, because I think this is probably the biggest potential job of the week on the ETH side, and I kind of like it art-wise. So it's called Raster 400 collection. It's going to be considered a curated. What's your take on this one, Tyler?
I'm bearish in general. I think just the art blocks market right now is seeing this the lowest liquidity it has in weeks. If you've been paying attention to any of the recent events, drops, they're either not missing out 1 hour of secondary trading before it's just slow decline. And almost everything is well below mint. Primarily the curated. This season of curated drops have all been absolutely terrible mints. From a trading perspective.
Don't you talk about fake it till you make it like that.
And there's been, even fake it till you make it, had a brief window where it was profitable. Each of them have had windows where they're profitable. But this one, in general, I mean, I like it. I think the aesthetics are nice. Animated sets don't typically do all that well. I think the still art has a premium.
Takes forever for them to load, too.
That's always a problem early on because that early secondary action, not that many people are using the other sites like Article or Archipelago. Like they are just looking at OpenSea. If they're not revealed, they're just not going to trade. Maybe they just walk away. But 400 supply, if this thing gets down close to min price at 0.25, I like it. If it's at 0.5 or higher, I think it's much riskier. At 1, it's total pass for me. But we'll see. Maybe this is the one to pull things back in the art blocks world, but I don't see it right now.
I just want it to be known that, like you guys know, I've been recently touting the Tezos thing. If you spent 0.25 ETH in Tez on Tezos, you could build like an art collection with really cool stuff from like artists that are in art blocks as well, like Makio 395, and there's another one that is getting lost in me for that same price. You could own like hundreds of good pieces instead of like being a degenerate on this. Like this take could be like way off in left field and be wrong, but like seeing like all of the other artists and how cheap you could get into other things on Tez and Solana, and even some additions on ETH. Like I have really no interest in art blocks anymore. Like I'd rather go find like the diamond in the rough guy who's selling his stuff for like $5-10. If it doesn't make it, it doesn't make it. And I have a piece that I like to look at for $5 or $10 rather than go below. What would this be? This be like 450, 460 at bottom at 0.25. Like I just don't know why. Like I do know why, but like personally, like I don't buy into it anymore after like kind of experience like the cheap side of buying cool art. Like I find this like you just don't need it. Like go buy cheap art and have fun.
I'm with you. I think a lot of traders share that perspective. We should do a Tez Focus show. You can jump back on and give us a tour. But Lou, this isn't the only art drop of the week. GM DAO, the GM Studio, is back on Saturday with Catharsis. We talked a little bit about this on a show in the past. It's you see the style. It's got like the scribbly lines, different colors. What's interesting about this one is he's using what he's calling long structure, wherein he's having like the artistic style spill across multiple pieces. So that is encouraging people to buy sets of 2 or 3, which might make a nice dent in the supply. It's 999 supply, a bit on the high side, but 0.15 ETH mint. The previous GM DAO mints have all run past 1 at peak. The recent one, Factura, got into like the mid 3s after catching like a serious hype wave. It's back down now. But there's definitely going to be upside on this one for minters. For folks who can get in on secondary at a decent price, there might be some nice upside as well.
Yeah. So those are the main ones we're looking at this week. And sort of what I said earlier, like this is, you might want to own the last curated of proof of work Ethereum blockchain.
Oh, that's a neat.
If you want to talk about some historical stuff, like there are history maxis when it comes to art blocks. But as you said, like this series overall has been pretty meh. The best parts of art blocks have been what has been connected to proof ecosystem, oddly enough, at least in the past few months here. So we'll see how those do.
I really like that narrative, Lou. That's the whole thing with art is the historical narrative. Like if like the merge narrative was going to work for anything, like I don't like this seems like a prime one for that to work on. It might not be like right away, but like at some point I could see like someone start pounding the table about like, hey, this was the last one on proof of work, and like that kind of matters to me. I'm buying it. I don't even like art blocks, and I'm buying that.
Yeah, we've seen that with just some weird ETH projects like the crypto skulls. Like some of these projects just got hyped just because you find one narrative. So you never know. Not necessarily saying to buy it either, because like 0.25 ETH in this economy, just go turn that into Solana and go play over there. I think because you could get way more things, like you said, like if you're going on other blockchains. So it's somewhat risky because of what's been going on recently, but we'll see. And yeah, we'll be back here to talk about that later as well. But thanks for hopping on and being able to talk through this Tuesday edition of Lucky Trader Lounge. And we'll see you guys next time.